Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're diving into a day that absolutely shook the NBA universe, June 25th, 2026. The Minnesota Timberwolves didn't just nibble around the edges of their roster. No, they swung a literal sledgehammer, executing a monumental trade that sent former All-Star guard LaMelo Ball to the Twin Cities. We're going to break this all down today because this isn't just your standard roster swap. It's a massive, franchise-altering gamble with ripple effects across the entire league.
And man, you can just feel the electric energy right out of the gate. When asked about the trade, LaMelo's own reaction was, "It's a dream, man. It's a dream." He even entertained the idea of eventually teaming up with his brother Lonzo in Minnesota. The sheer magnitude of this move brings a completely new, undeniable swagger to the North. But how exactly did we get here, and what did it cost?
Well, here is our roadmap. We'll start with how the NBA universe was shaken, detail the exact assets exchanged, break down Minnesota's all-in gamble, analyze Charlotte's strategic reset, and finally figure out the ultimate winners and losers.
All right, part 1, the NBA universe shaken. To truly understand a trade of this magnitude, we have to look at the catalyst behind it. What actually forced Minnesota's hand? It was the intense pressure cooking behind the scenes. Look, Anthony Edwards has officially ascended into pure superstardom. The Timberwolves reached the Western Conference Finals twice in the last 3 seasons, signaling a very tight win-now window. But the roster? It just wasn't keeping up. Reports indicated that Edwards essentially demanded an upgraded supporting cast and even threatened to force a trade if Minnesota didn't deliver. The front office was staring down the barrel of losing their absolute franchise cornerstone, so they had to make a splash.
Moving on to part 2, the assets exchanged.
Because prying a star of LaMelo's caliber away doesn't come cheap. Looking at the exact breakdown of this exchange, Minnesota gets an immediate injection of star power in LaMelo Ball, along with Australian wing Josh Green. And hey, Green shouldn't be ignored here. He gives the Wolves an athletic defender who fits perfectly around stars without constantly demanding the basketball. In return, Charlotte brings in a massive haul, beloved big man Naz Reid, plus a staggering 7 draft assets.
And we really need to emphasize the dizzying weight of this draft capital. We're talking 3 first-round pick swaps in 2028, 2029, and 2030. 3 second-round picks in 2029, 2032, and 2033. And the absolute crown jewel, a 2033 unprotected first-round pick. This is legitimately one of the largest asset transfers we've seen in franchise history. I mean, Charlotte essentially emptied Minnesota's entire draft cupboard.
Which brings us to part 3, Minnesota's all-in gamble.
Let's unpack the terrifying, yet completely fascinating logic behind Minnesota's strategy to mortgage so much of their future. Basketball-wise, the offensive upside is undeniable. You're pairing a tall, slippery, highly creative playmaker in LaMelo with a superstar built on pure, violent force in Anthony Edwards. LaMelo can take that heavy creation burden right off Edwards, push the tempo, and force defenses to guard every inch of the floor. Together, they give the Wolves a backcourt that could literally turn any regular possession into highlight roulette.
But we gotta anchor ourselves in the stark reality of the risk here. 105. That is the exact number of games LaMelo Ball played out of a possible 246 over his prior 3 seasons before his healthier 2025-26 campaign. When he plays, he completely bends the game to his will. But his availability? That's historically been a massive question mark. Minnesota is betting the house that he can actually stay on the floor.
And then there is the massive financial price tag. Ball had 3 years left on his franchise record designated rookie contract and just became eligible for a $119.2 million extension. Add it all up, and Minnesota is committing roughly $250 million to LaMelo for the next half-decade. That is an enormous financial anchor for a player with a pretty extensive injury history.
Plus, we can't ignore the collateral damage this does to the rest of the roster. Trading Naz Reid isn't just losing a massive fan favorite, it removes a former 6th Man of the Year candidate who was fully expected to step into a starting role. And remember, the Wolves also traded Julius Randle in a salary dump to the Nets in that exact same week. So suddenly, Minnesota's front court looks incredibly thin behind Rudy Gobert. It leaves them very small and, frankly, pretty vulnerable.
Okay, let's flip the script for part 4, Charlotte's reset.
So you might be wondering, why on earth would the Hornets willingly trade the face of their franchise? Well, the timing was actually perfect. LaMelo had just come off one of his healthiest seasons, averaging over 20 points and 7 assists, and he helped lead Charlotte to 44 wins and a play-in victory.
His trade value was at an absolute all-time peak. By moving him now, Charlotte dodged that massive long-term financial commitment and completely pivoted to a reset. Now they're building around youth like Brandon Miller and Con Cupel, adding a legitimate starting caliber big in Naz Reid, all while maintaining elite flexibility.
Through this deal, Charlotte essentially holds the keys to Minnesota's draft future all the way into the next decade. Think about it. If the Anthony Edwards and LaMelo Ball experiment implodes, or if injuries strike, these picks and swaps spanning from 2028 to 2033 could turn into incredibly valuable lottery tickets for the Hornets. It really is a masterclass in long-term asset management.
Finally, Part 5, Winners and Losers. It's time for the ultimate verdict. We've seen the staggering assets exchanged. We understand the logic, and we definitely see the risks. So, who actually won this zero-sum game? Let's check the pulse of the NBA media landscape to help us decide.
On one side, you've got fierce critics like NBA analyst Nick Wright. While he praised Charlotte for making a really tough decision, he offered a scathing critique of the Timberwolves. Wright views Ball as an unserious, injury-prone player and basically called the move to trade established pros like Randall and Reed for a high-usage, no-defense guard absolutely baffling. He essentially argues that Minnesota severely compromised their depth for a very flawed star.
But then, contrast that with veteran commentator Stephen A. Smith, who's offering some cautious optimism. While he totally acknowledged the valid concern that the Wolves got significantly smaller by losing Reed, he pointed out that from a pure basketball perspective, LaMelo's ultimate gift is passing, and pairing that elite passing with a superstar like Edwards, that is undeniably electric. The sheer talent ceiling is just sky high.
So breaking this all down objectively based on the sources, Charlotte looks like the clear strategic winner here. They cashed in their best player at absolute peak asset value and gained ultimate timeline flexibility without being tied down by long-term financial risk. Minnesota, on the other hand, definitely takes the loss in the columns of defense and depth. They took on a massive financial risk, lost essential front court size, and placed an enormous bet on a player with a spotty health record at best.
At the end of the day, star trades aren't supposed to be comfortable, right? They're designed to change ceilings. Minnesota already had a good team, but they were desperate to become a terrifying one. So I'll leave you with this to ponder. Did the Minnesota Timberwolves just perfectly pair two superstars to build the next NBA dynasty? Or did they just mortgage their entire future for a flashy illusion? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep your eyes on the court to see how this incredible gamble unfolds.